Hello, sir.
Hi, Radhika. How are you?
Hi, I'm good. Hope you're keeping well too.
Very well, thank you.
Yeah, many thanks for joining in today with us. You need no introduction whatsoever because your journey has been quite inspiring plus quite intellectual as well. So let me quickly start by asking you about your journey in Transaction Square. What made you join the journey of entrepreneurship? What made you become an entrepreneur after your stint in the corporate industry for a long period of time?
Actually, it was always a dream to create jobs. Uh, big op- Big firms find it easy to create jobs. Actually,
Hmm.
of the brand which they have, they can recruit people. So what I thought is that if I could create opportunities for people, all don't get into big fours. So there are a lot of capable people, a lot of people who are, very ambitious, coming across different cities. And I thought if I could just be a channel to create opportunities for them
Hmm.
and set up something which is a temple of, supporting families,
Hmm.
that would be something which this country needed. So it was job creation and, building something which is like a temple where peoples and their families could get a livelihood from. That's what
Correct.
drove me to do it. So I just realized that if I was in KPMG, somebody else can do exactly what I'm doing. So
Hmm.
whereas people can go out and create livelihood for others. So I just thought I had that inner voice to do it. And I did.
Correct. I mean, job creation is something which is considered as a really primary thing to increase India's GDP in today's time. And what you're doing is currently very useful for other employees as well. So I wanted to ask you this question that what were you doing when you were in the years of your college? That is when you were of our age in your 20s.
So when I was in college, things were, you know, almost the same as it is today. The reason I'm saying this is because I have a son which is of your age and a daughter of your age.
Hmm.
And what I see them going through is exactly similar to what we went through, or exactly the same. So people say times have changed, this, that, nothing. It's just digital more, but everything is the same.
Hmm.
And what was different then was that because we were not well off, I had to work. So I was doing two jobs outside college. So one was writing accounts somewhere, and then doing French tuitions, taking French tuitions for some students. So today I don't see my kids or the kids around having a necessity to earn a livelihood
Hmm.
while in college. But my college days was working and then earning a livelihood to support my studies. So that's the way the background went. So I had two jobs after the college hours, which I used to do, and in Asians worked as an accountant somewhere.
Okay, okay. And what do you think that is it good to have an experience before starting something of your own like you did, or is it good for youngsters to straight out of college start up a business of themselves?
Actually, it depends upon what you are doing. So, for example, if you are a professional, which is a doctor, lawyer, CA,
Hmm.
then working in a bigger organization, having a built up reputation, working on bigger projects, then having the goodwill to move on and start something on your own is very important. Whereas if you are a new generation entrepreneur, which is into IT, technology, and there, idea is more important than the experience behind it. So in that case, you can jump straight out of college and take an entrepreneurial plunge and get going. So
Hmm.
since I wanted to be a chartered accountant and practice as a chartered accountant, if I had to start on my own, nobody would know me and nobody would give me work. So then working in a bigger organization, developing reputation, developing contacts, developing knowledge and experience
Hmm.
is very important before you start on your own. So for profession, you have to work in bigger firms, then go on your own, like most lawyers do. Doctors also, they
Hmm.
train in municipal hospitals or big colleges or big private hospitals, and then they go out and build their own hospitals or become successful practitioners. That goes for CAs also. So for business and ideas, I wouldn't say that's the part, but for the profession, certainly working somewhere and then branching out gives you a lot of social capital which is needed to get
Hmm.
started.
That's absolutely true. So if you were to describe your venture to kids of our age, that is people who are in their 20s, how would you describe your venture to them?
I would say we run a temple of excellence,
Hmm.
and excellence is in tax and regulatory field. And our unique specialization is M&A and restructuring. Our vision is very simple. We don't have a complicated vision. Our vision is to be the go-to people for M&A and restructuring. So whenever there's a Transaction Square should be involved. That's the dream we live. And it's not money. It's not about very complicated stuff. Wherever there's a transaction, there has to be Transaction Square. And we want to be around the country because there are promoters around the country who actually have good businesses who need help. And when I look at creation job means supporting a businessman who's running a good business in a tax and regulatory field also is creating jobs because he's creating jobs, just supporting him. So I would say it's a temple of mergers, acquisitions, restructurings, and tax valuations. And it's very simple vision, no complications.
Okay, and does the name arrive from this vision itself, or there is some interesting story behind the name?
The name arises from two places. So there is a called Salisbury Square in UK, which is where KPMG was headquartered in the UK. And when I used to go to Salisbury Square, I used to feel that if I had a firm of my own, it would be called Transaction Square. And then when I visited Times Square, and I stood there, I said, no, if Times Square is famous, Square name is very lucky. So Transaction Square, Salisbury Square, Times Square. And so I just felt that the luck which follows the square name, which is eminent with the popularity of Times Square, should be a part of Transaction Square name. And that's how it got formed.
Okay, that's interesting.
And then as it happens, that's what we do. So it stands to the things which we do: M&A, restructuring, transactions, tax regulation.
And since Transaction Square has around 6 founders, do you think that whenever somebody is starting up with their own venture, they need to have co-partners, or they can sustain with themselves as well?
So it depends upon what business you're starting. So if you're starting on your own, which is with an idea, then you don't need 4 founders. You need 2 or 3 founders, one for IT, one for marketing, one for the idea. It's very lonely. So it's always good to have 2-3 people, because 2-3 people give strength, 2-3 people give courage. You have good days, bad days. You have days where things go wrong. So you come together and make sure that you carry each other through. So now, from that perspective, that is a more comforting thing to do if you have more people with you. So it started on that basis. That in profession, it's always good to have different skills, different locations. We wanted to be a national firm, so all our founders are in different geographies, which makes sure that we have presence nationally. And also we exchange ideas, bounce off ideas, have a shared vision. Then you're just happier in the journey and you feel supported in life. Like look at COVID. I mean, we never knew that we would be 6 months at home, all of us. But being together helps you tide over this. Like if you have friends in college, even COVID, talk to people, you get some support. You have good days, bad days, but you always have people to support you and carry you through.
Correct, absolutely, that's true. So this makes me also ask you that how did you initially finance your business?
It was self-financed, so I had some savings. Me and my partner broke those savings, and we put it in the firm. So it was self-financed, and it was past years of savings just put into the firm to make it work.
Okay,
and then it started to refinance itself.
Okay, and has your entrepreneurial motivations changed since the first year that you started Transaction Square?
No, really. It's getting sharper and sharper by the day. So when you leave a big organization, I mean, I left an organization of 10,000 people, and I used to leave a team of 2,100 people. There are a lot of uncertainties, a lot of questions in your mind that what will happen. I mean, I used to have 3 secretaries, so going anywhere was simple. But now I was on my own, without an office, without anybody to support me. It's a few people who came along the way and who lifted me. So the fear was then. So when COVID came, you didn't fear COVID, because if you could leave such a big thing and really go out and start afresh, these small things really don't matter.
Hmm.
So I would say the journey is stronger and stronger. And today, if I see, if I have to have a regret on it, maybe I should have done it 5, 7 years earlier.
Okay.
So maybe a little earlier, at the early 40, not at mid 40s.
Okay, and what's been your
So
most
I would say.
satisfying moment in the business so far with respect to clients or with respect to your business in some way or the other?
I would say it is satisfying moments happen every day when you do some good work on your clients and the client comes back and tells you that we couldn't do it without you,
Hmm.
or we could have managed it unless you gave us the inputs. Those moments are unparalleled. Yeah. So really coming up and being appreciated by your clients, seeing a happy team around you, and seeing the Transaction Square brand built block by block, being recognized and respected is something which makes you happy every day. So I wouldn't say a moment. I would say there are moments every day which lift you up and which takes the journey forward.
Okay, that's so good to hear. So you are in a sector which is different from the degree that you had graduated in. So how far do you think that college degree or college education matters in what you do ahead in your life?
See, actually, I think, give you my background. I used to be in Nrsimhaji College, NM, which is
Yes, we are from the same college.
okay, yeah. So NM, and there was a college which was college which was then serious. It was called a Factory for Chartered Accountancy.
Hmm.
So 10% did CA. And the environment was always educative. It was, I used to consider Mithibai to be a college where it was lighter in commerce, it was good in science, and NM was reputed like a Mithibai science, NM commerce, and so on and so forth. So what I think is that in my college days also, I used to see many people chasing degrees. So like, oh, CA, let us do ICWA, let us do CS, let us do MBA, let us do CFA. And some of my batchmates went out and did 4, 5 degrees also. So the question is that should you chase degrees or should you chase experience?
Hmm.
So what I felt is that your first job should be your best job. So after I cleared my CA, my first job was Arthur Andersen. That was the best firm in the world in consulting. And one degree and a good first break is all you need to make your life. And is the CA degree relevant to what I do? It's very relevant because I'm in M&A restructuring, and important what I've learned. But really, what you do on the job, what you learn on the job, what you get groomed into, the clothes you wear, the people you meet, the way you talk, the way you present, makes a big difference. So I would say don't chase degrees, chase experience. Have one good degree to stand upon, and then you build based on experience with a good job. And then you venture out to something on your own. The mistake which I think people do is they bunk their work, articleship, internship for degrees. That is a wrong thing to do. Now, is CA relevant today? It is a source of strength. It has built-in resilience, it has built-in patience, it has built-in success. So whenever you go through a bad time, you always look back and think how you cleared your CA. And if you could clear anything else. So I would say it is a big source of inspiration to be a CA.
That's a fair point and a great masterpiece advice by you on the degrees versus skill sets. So moving forward, if you could time travel back in the previous 15 years of your life, what would be your lessons from the mistakes that you made in your corporate career, which you would want to talk about so that others are aware about it and they do not do the same thing?
I wouldn't say mistakes. I think, what is important is to understand what is your calling. I'll give you an example, simple. Take a doctor who's a brilliant heart surgeon, and he loves to cure people who come to him for heart surgery, and he loves to do surgeries. And then he suddenly sets up an hospital, and he has to manage the hospital. So when you manage the hospital, you have to worry about the oxygen coming to the hospital, or you have to worry about the maintenance of the hospital, COVID, non-COVID beds, getting municipalities and doing different kinds of things. And then he stops doing surgeries because he doesn't have time to do surgeries. He hires 5, 7 people to do surgeries. So if you see big hospitals are all promoted by doctors whose passion was to do surgeries. And they get into the management of the hospital. And really the question you have to ask yourself is that, do you want to be a skilled professional or do you want to be a entrepreneur manager? So like say in KPMG, my roles got bigger and bigger. And as my roles got bigger and bigger, I started to do more management work. And I started to do more management work, so I could not sit on a transaction and make a transaction happen. So really from a skilled professional whose passion was doing great, biggest transactions, reading his deals in the newspaper, I became a manager. And so the question is, some people love to be managers, some people love to be professionals, some people love to be. So do you want to run a hospital or do you want to do the best surgery is what you have to say. And both are right. Nothing is right or wrong. It's like what your calling is, what your purpose is. Yes. So the mistake which I would not allow you to do is follow your heart. So if you think you want to be the best professional, then go out and be the best professional. If you want to be the best manager, then go out and be the best manager. But know what you want. That is the most important thing.
True, I couldn't agree more on this. It's a really great advice. Thank you for that. Coming to the economy and the Indian space that we are working in currently, the reduction in corporate tax has been the biggest positive booster for corporate India last year. So have you seen any visible positive change post that in terms of companies wanting to set up their subsidiaries in India?
I think India is the biggest opportunity in the world. And I believe that, and I continue to believe that COVID, no COVID, India, China, whatever you hear will all pass by. And the fact is there are around 1.3 billion people and they are aspirational. They are all wanting to do well in life and they will consume more, they will, buy more and the economy will bounce back and everything will happen. So if I was looking at India from anywhere in the world, I cannot not be in India. I have to be in India because India is the largest market. China people find a black hole. They don't understand the China government and the Chinese way of functioning. So India is the second largest market after China for anything which you want to sell. So all companies will be in India in any shape and form. All investments will come to India in any shape and form. Ultimately, you will just hear that it is going here, going there. Asia Pacific is more like this. India is less stable. But the fundamental of the fact that there are 1.3 billion people with aspirations and ambition can never be forgotten. I mean, you look at the V-shaped recovery now. I mean, you talk to people, steel plants are operating at 100%. If you see cars are looking to be turning around, two-wheelers have gone back. Despite the pandemic of 6 months, things are looking to bounce back. And now when you go out, I was just passing through Linking Road when I came for the session to the office. People are moving around now. And in the next 6-7 months, once a vaccine comes out, things will be back to normal. So India has an opportunity can never go wrong. So you are in a country for your career.
So can we say that countries are betting on India's population rather than India's economy as a whole?
India's economy is dependent on India's population. So if there are 1 billion people and the consumption of everything is so less, penetration is so low, whether it's pharma, insurance, housing, to cater to the aspirations of people, things will have to be manufactured, things will have to be sold. It's the largest market, largest democratic consumer market in terms of number of people. So that will lead to an economic boost. Very, very few economies who even can dream to go at 8 to 10%, which India will bounce back.
Right.
So the right place. If I look at Transaction Square, say 20 years down the line, we are at what US was in 1970, where everything became so big in the next 20 years. You're seeing all that happen, and HDFCs, they're getting so big. I mean, so we are at the right place for the right opportunities.
True. So following to this question, there has been a lot of talk about global companies wanting to ship their units from China to India. And since Transaction Square deals into bringing in foreign companies and incorporating them in India, what is your reading of the matter? And have you seen any real traction on companies being enthusiastic about shifting their base to India?
I think, it's important to be not too excited about the short term and be realistic about the long term. Shifting supply chains and all are long-term decisions. It's not a plug to be taken out and put in another plug. So these things will take time. All I can say is that results of this will take around 2-3 years to see. So people will explore, people will see what to do. It will take 2-3 years to realign, and by the time you really see big things getting shifted, it will happen subtly. You won't even come to know. So right now, people are saying pharma will shift, chemicals will shift, manufacturing will shift, and there are all kinds of names going around. First year, nothing will shift. But in the next 2-3 years, there will be a strategic alignment towards India, which will happen. And now the biggest event which we are seeing is the US elections. So once the US elections are done, there's Democrats, public, whatever it is, then the direction of the world will even become sharper. Because that will drive the global trade with China. So I would say it will certainly happen, will take time. Immediately you will see no results. They only talks.
Sure, fair point. So there has also been a lot of talk around private equity VC money coming into India in the last few months, but it has mostly been concentrated in some well-established players. So do you think that the private equity industry has come of age, or the story has just started? What do you think? Are these firms looking at India as a great opportunity?
Oh, huge. I mean, if you look at private equity is into different formats. So first is sovereign wealth funds. So if you see the Brookfields of the world, the CPPIB and Arias, and they will keep investing into India because India still gives very good return for infrastructure, real estate, and long-term assets. So REITs, what you see will keep going up. India will always be a hub for good innovation. So we have great innovations from India, whether it's ATM, Grofers, Ola, so many different kinds of new ventures, new ideas, which are replications or creation of new ideas from the global setup. The IT or the financial technologies opportunities that will keep growing. So there'll be venture capital money coming and flowing into that kind of opportunities. And private equity will come and buy out Indian companies. So like now, as we go through this session, there's so many buyouts happening. Blackstone bought out. There is a deal which is Carlyle bought out Sequent or KKR, Max Healthcare, or KKR again, JP Chemicals and Pharma. So these deals will keep going up, and private equity will come and control and buy out significant stakes in Indian companies and turn them around. And will also make investments and give growth capital to companies. So this is just a start of a big wave. I mean, it is only going to get bigger and bigger because the deal sizes are so big. Seeing in Reliance is such big, no? You've never seen such kind of numbers ever before.
Yes, that's correct. So, and since the Supreme Court has given a blanket moratorium and the IBC has been dissolved, the general consensus is that the real pain will surface in the next few months for some companies. So, do you think that these companies will survive post-COVID, or will there be a widespread consolidation across various industries?
So there will be consolidation. So if you look at the COVID scenario, there are three categories of companies. One is what we are. So today, what is working is technology. This is how we are doing this webinar also. Second is pharma. We are taking medicines, and third is the whole consumer space. Like we're eating food, we are having Maggie, we are having Nestle coffee, and so on. So that is still intact. That's working at 100% capacity, and that's doing very well. Second space is the discretionary spend, which is like a travel bag, and then if you look at watches, Titan watches, the retail space, and so on and so on. And third is the space which is most impacted, which is malls, hotels, theaters, airlines. There are three buckets in which you've categorized it. Bucket one is fine; it's going to be working well. IT sector is working successfully. Bucket two, you're seeing a turnaround happen now. People are buying cars, people are going out and still going out and buying now stuff. It is not fully there, but it is getting better. Third bucket depends upon how the lockdown opens up. Airlines have opened up, hotels have opened up. And so there will be some players in this bucket in 2 and 3 which will not have the cash to survive this. And that's where the consolidation will happen. Now, how many people will not have the cash to survive it? The unorganized sector will struggle to survive. That's where you have to stop or get consolidated into bigger ones. And the organized sector will pull this through. Some may not be able to pull it through, and they'll be acquired by the stronger one. But so if you see stocks of companies which are in 2 and 3 buckets are now rebounding. If you look at Indigo Airlines, if you look at Titan, Asian Paints, they've all rebounded.
Yeah.
Which is like that means the worst is coming to be over now. In terms of.
So, talking about the unorganized sector, which largely has been affected, what do you think that the work from home culture is here to stay even post-COVID? Because companies are very much okay with letting their employees work from home. So, what is your take on its effect on the economy in general?
See, work from home depends upon what kind of work you do. So, say college home. I mean, do you think, take your case, would you like to go to college or would you like to study from home?
I would love to go to college.
Why?
Because one-on-one interaction is
travel. You don't need to travel. You don't need to worry. You don't need to dress up every day. You're comfortable at home. Why do you want to go to college?
Just because networking is much more effective in colleges, and that's the reason why people love going to college rather than studying. They love meeting their friends, discussing about various topics. So that's the whole reason why even I would want to go.
Correct. So you would travel from Virar and go to HR college. You would travel wherever you are and travel that 2 hours and go to college. That's true for all businesses. That's true for all businesses because social capital is most important to running businesses. It's most important. We can't compare US and ours. And US is a big country. It's sizes of India. Wherein travel. So there you can do work from home and you have offices from home. If you look at a country like India, which is, populous and it is more on the social capital of meeting and working together. So work from home today is a cost-saving device because you're not switching on the office, not having security, not having ACs. Because things start getting better, everything will be back to office. And if you think you will sit at home and work from home, soon the company will let you go.
Yeah.
They want people to be working from office.
That's absolutely true. Talking about the regulatory environment in India, it's very complex. And just a few weeks ago, we came across an article that showed the Herculean effort that needed to just apply for permission to open a manufacturing unit in India. So do you think India can really take off as an investment destination till such draconian laws are in place?
First of all, the laws are not draconian. This is true everywhere. And you have to navigate the law everywhere. So the opportunity is so big. This is all blown out of proportion that, so many approvals are required, red tapeism and all. That's all rubbish. So look at it as an Indian, things are getting better day by day. And there are laws to be complied everywhere. We can simplify things, we can do things better, which is what our endeavor should be, which is happening. But that will not take people away from doing business in India. People will still do business in India. They'll find ways around it. They'll make it. So I wouldn't worry about complex law, and these are all blown up for no reason. And the same people who blow it up, then again acquire companies in India. Why?
Yeah, that's a very simple and crisp answer to that. Yeah. Talking about the GDP, the current GDP numbers show that India is due for a deeper recession vis-a-vis other countries. So how do you expect things to play out in the next 12 months in terms of normalization?
I think in 6 months, we will be normal. Vaccine should be out in the next 3-4 months. Once vaccine is out, the fear will go away. And fear is already going away as we see.
Yeah.
Black cases are per day. People are now getting on with life. And the ones who will show courage will go very far. So the way things are like, especially for you all, learn new skills, learn newer things, make the most of this time, because soon you will have no time. Everything will start getting to be normal. 6 months by Q4, we will be at equal of last year. We won't degrow from Q4, which is from January to March. So this is the last 2-3 months of so-called rest.
Okay, I'll take that as a warning. that we just have some months in our hand now.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you just spoke that when vaccine will come, everything will just ease down. So do you think that the vaccine is only silver bullet that can make things better for a global economy?
Not really. I think the herd immunity is already developing. So
Hmm.
if you called everybody to college and did a test, at least 25-30% of the people will be antibodies. You wouldn't have even come to know when COVID hit you and went away. And that is what all those sero tests and the antigen tests are saying, that the antibodies have got developed. So I don't think vaccine is the only silver bullet. I think that the herd immunity is getting built. And now we know how to deal with it. So in the sense, like if you have fever, cough, you know that immediately you get a test done, take precautions, isolate, and then get ready and get back to it. So the first 6 months back, there was no way, we didn't know how to deal with it. Now we know how to deal with it.
Hmm.
So vaccine is just an additional comfort. And with every passing day, we are dealing with it better.
Correct.
So I think now people are done with it. People will get on with life.
Yes.
Bombay is unique because Bombay of the travel of local trains. If local trains were on, Bombay would be completely on.
Yeah, that's a fair point. Even the metros have started in Delhi, so I'm expecting that the Mumbai city will also start it soon.
Yeah, so around Diwali it should start. But if the local trains are on, people like if you see the bus queues, people queue in the bus. Yeah, I mean,
Hmm.
buses are full. That people are getting scared to go to work. People go to work.
Yes. So a very generalized question now, which I would love to ask you, that India has climbed the ease of doing business considerably in the last few years, but most people think that it's only good to do business in cities like Mumbai and Delhi. So do you think that this ground has really changed? The reality is something else?
Not really. I think there is business around and it's specific to different kinds of stuff. If you look at, say, Bombay is a financial center. If you look at,
Hmm.
say, Delhi, it's a hub. That's a political capital. If you look at Ludhiana, it's steel and textiles. So every city has its own area of business. I think there's business all around. And now with this COVID thing happening, I'm seeing UP and MP also going to come up in a big way.
Yes.
So the states, the true Hindi-speaking states, also will rock. So as Transaction Square, I mean, I soon will have an office in UP and MP also.
Oh,
They look very good.
yes, I hope that opens very soon.
Correct. Correct. So, you know, what I think is that it's important that in every negative statement you hear, there's an opportunity. So we get bogged down with mass thinking. Mass thinking is, oh, like, now the mass thinking is like Riya Chakravarti and Sushant Singh Rajput.
Hmm.
Who's right or wrong? So you're just forming opinions. So when you see this red tapeism, you see this, you form a mass thinking view. Oh, India is difficult to business. That's not the truth. There are people who see opportunities in all this and get on with life and make more money. So as a youngster, you must see where your passion is and where the opportunity is.
Hmm.
Logically, with 1.3 billion people, whatever you do, you cannot fail in this country. Even if you
Yes.
start, even the tea wala down has people waiting to take tea.
Yes, yes, absolutely. I mean, I myself
In
have,
his own way.
yes, I myself have heard people raising thousands of money on a per day basis just serving tea to others. So it's a great business though.
Correct. And it's not business, it's his passion. He loves making tea. He
Hmm.
his tea before he gives it to you. And so it's you follow your passion. This is a country which is full of opportunities.
Yes. Talking
So I
about
would
your
say
broad clientele, in which industries are you seeing the most traction right now in terms of new investments or capex?
this time the three sectors are looking very good, which is IT, FMCG, and
Hmm.
but moving on, the discretionaries also will start picking up again. So I would say in the next 3-4 months, the discretionaries, which are all these retail shows and industrial goods, will pick up again. So investments will move there. But right now, the deals are happening in these three respective sectors. So if you see Geo platform, you see retail, it's again
Hmm.
consumer, which is the Reliance. It's happening, and JB Chemicals and Pharma, it is Pharma. So it's happening in these three sectors. But I see a lot of consolidation which will happen in the others. Also. Things will look up.
So in terms of FMCG sector, which companies do you most bet on? Would it be the indigenous companies like ITC, or would it be a foreign-based company like Unilever?
Both. I would actually bet on Nestle instead of both of these.
Okay.
Because if you look at Nestle's products, you can't
Mm.
advertise baby products. And
Yeah.
mother in this country gives milk made Nestle food to its people, the biggest entry barrier. So actually, I wouldn't say FMCG this or that. Like a Godrej consumer, I mean, sanitization, you will always have a Godrej consumer sanitizer.
Mm.
So like each one has its own merit. Some have really good moats which prohibits entry of other players in the market. They all look good to me.
Yes. So lastly, I would just love for you to give out some piece of advice for all our young viewers. What would your take be on for this time that they are juggling in terms of exams or other study related stress? What would you suggest them to do?
Well, I would say if I was advising my children, and you all are like my children age, what I would say is have a clear goal in your life.
Hmm.
Don't look at exams and all. Have a clear goal. You should be something. And to be something, you have to choose where your passion is. Some may want it in law, some may want it in MBA, some may want it in business, whatever it is. Choose your passion clearly and move in that direction relentlessly. Because what
Hmm.
happens is in college, we just move around, we don't take our life seriously.
Yeah.
These are your 4 years, and you have to get that one degree to get into that one great corporate,
Hmm.
and then life is yours. So your goal is one great degree, then first very good job, and then life is yours. First very good job, even for 2 years, if you do, you move
Hmm.
into entrepreneurship. But if you're doing profession more years, because as I told you, profession requires more big firm. I think don't bum around your college life in not knowing what to do and just letting time go by. It's
Hmm.
important to have a goal, to have a vision, and without that, you will go nowhere in your life. It's important to be focused.
Yes. Thank you so much for that golden words. And it was really great chatting with you today. Thank you so much for joining in again with us.
All the best. Bye. God bless. Be safe.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye.